Welcome to HFY Beyond Terra, where humanity doesn't just survive, it becomes the galaxy's biggest surprise. Subscribe, and let's go beyond Terra.
The reception hall of the Illyrian Concord looked like someone had decided diplomacy was best conducted inside a jewel box. Light spilled from the ceiling in slow, color-shifting bands, violet to amber to a pale ocean blue, like the sky itself was breathing. Thousands of tiny hovering lanterns drifted between tall columns carved with interlocking spirals. Every surface had been polished until it could hold a reflection the way still water holds. Moonlight. And in the middle of all that shimmering grandeur was M.E. human, civilian, a new attached to the Terran delegation who'd been told, with a bright smile and a too casual pat on the shoulder, to just mingle. Mingle. I did what any sensible person does when dropped into a room full of heads of state and ancient bloodlines. I looked for the nearest chair and prayed. No one talked to me. The trouble was, chairs were political here. Everything was political here. Seats were assigned by rank, lineage, and the kind of invisible math that makes planets go to war over a mistake in the placement of a napkin. I'd been given a thin metallic band from my wrist with my name and status encoded inside. It blinked a polite green. Guest, non-voting, provisional. In other words, decorative. I stood near an enormous table of refreshments, each platter guarded by a small army of attendants with serene faces and sharp eyes. The food looked like the idea of food, glossy things that might be fruit, translucent cubes that shivered faintly as if breathing. I wasn't brave enough to put anything in my mouth without knowing whether it would dissolve my tongue. So I did the next best thing. I drifted along the perimeter of the hall, scanning for a place I could exist without being perceived. That was when the music shifted. The stringed instruments, some traditional, some hovering and vibrating without touch, pulled into a lower, richer chord. Conversation softened. Heads turned. Something important was happening. I followed the collective attention and saw the dais at the far end, raised by a few steps and lined with seats that looked less like chairs and more like sculpted thrones. Each one was shaped to a different anatomy. Each one was positioned with deliberate geometry. And the central seat, the one that caught the most light, was empty. No. Not empty. Waiting. The attendant beside it stood perfectly still, hands folded. A living statue. I didn't understand the customs well enough to know what it meant, but I did understand the feeling in the room. That quiet anticipation people get when the door is about to open and everyone needs to look like they were already standing correctly before the important person arrives. I turned away quickly. I didn't want to be seen staring. Staring was probably offensive. Breathing was probably offensive. Being a biped with forward-facing eyes was likely a declaration of war. I took 3 careful steps along the wall and realized too late that I was walking into the path of a moving cluster of nobles. They were tall, willowy beings with layered robes and ornaments that chimed softly. Their faces were elegant in that unsettling way where you can tell something is beautiful, but your brain refuses to categorize it as safe. They spoke in clipped tones, not bothering to lower their voices. The Terrans lack refinement. Their ships are practical, yes, but so are mining rigs. A species that announces itself with kinetic artillery is hardly. I swallowed and angled away. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to become a talking point. I didn't want to end up as the human incident that got referenced in future treaties, but the hall's layout betrayed me. The perimeter narrowed where a column jutted outward, and the nobles spread like a slow tide. If I turned back, I'd bump into an attendant. If I stepped forward, I'd collide with the cluster. So I did the most human thing imaginable. I tried to squeeze through. My shoulder brushed a robe. A chime went. Silent. Conversation stopped. A dozen eyes turned. toward me in perfect synchronization. I froze with the instinct of prey that has realized the forest just got quiet. Sorry, I managed in the trade tongue. My voice sounded too loud, too rough, like gravel dropped onto silk. Didn't mean to. One of them leaned closer, nostrils flaring as if tasting the air. Its gaze flicked to my wristband. The green blinked again, cheerfully unaware I was about to be socially executed. Terran, it said, the word sharp dot. Another lifted a hand, fingers long and delicate. How does one misplace oneself so thoroughly? Heat crawled up my neck. I was just looking for a seat. The cluster's amusement didn't come with smiles. It came with a subtle shift in posture, the kind predators use when they found something they can play with. A seat. One echoed, as if I'd asked for a crown. Here. I tried to step back. The wall didn't move, but I did. And that's when it happened. A hand smaller than I expected, cool as polished stone, closed around my wrist. Not harsh. Not violent. Just certain. It pulled me sideways with effortless authority, drawing me out of the cluster's path as if the room itself had shifted to make space. My breath caught, because the hand belonged to the one person in the hall who didn't need to argue for space. She stood beside me in robes that shimmered like midnight water. Her hair, or the equivalent, fell in thick strands threaded with small crystalline ornaments. Her skin was a pale, luminous hue, like moonlight caught under ice. Her eyes were a deep, reflective shade that made me think of distant stars. The nobles stiffened. The entire hall, I realized, had gone quiet. She didn't look at them. She looked at me. Then she tightened her grip just enough to make it clear it wasn't a suggestion, and in perfectly pronounced trade speech, she said, "Sit beside me." My brain stalled. My body did not. I followed her, because my survival instincts are apparently programmed to obey royalty. She guided me toward the dais, the raised platform. The line of seats that screamed "Do not approach" in every language known to carbon-based life. As we climbed the steps, the nobles parted like water. People turned. Attendants lowered their eyes. Diplomats who'd been chatting over shimmering drinks suddenly found intense fascination in their own hands. I kept waiting for someone to stop us, to gently correct this, to tell me there had been a mistake. No one did. She led me to the central seat, hers and the seat directly beside it. That seat, I now saw, was not tailored for any species in the room. It was angular, minimal, built for a spine like mine, built for a human. My throat went dry. She released my wrist and gestured. "Sit." I sat. The moment my weight settled, the seat adjusted slightly, subtle shifts, like it was testing my proportions. The material warmed just enough to be comfortable. I stared straight ahead, hands gripping the edges like the chair might try to eject me if I moved wrong. The princess sat in her throne with fluid grace, crossing one leg over the other. She faced the room as if she owned every molecule of air in it. Then, without looking at me, she spoke softly. "Breathe," she said. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly. The room stayed quiet for another heartbeat long, enough for everyone to understand that this was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, not a human blundering into sacred territory. This was an act. Then the music resumed, carefully, like someone picking up a dropped glass and pretending it was part of the performance. The nobles who'd cornered me retreated, robes whispering. I could feel their eyes like needles. I leaned slightly toward the princess, careful not to appear conspiratorial. "Your Highness," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "I think there has not," she said calmly. I blinked. "But I don't. My status is decorative," she said, and there was the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. "Yes, I read it." My stomach dipped. Then why am I sitting here? Her fingers rested on the arm of her throne, adorned with rings that looked more like delicate, mechanical sculptures than jewelry. She turned her head just enough to look at me with one eye, as if I were an interesting problem. Because, she said, I wanted you to. I swallowed. That's going to cause trouble. She faced forward again. It already has. That wasn't comforting. A procession began, ambassadors approaching the dais, offering greetings, gifts, short speeches. Each one bowed to the princess, then after a measurable pause decided what to do about me. Some ignored me. Some offered stiff nods. One avian diplomat fluffed its feathers in visible irritation before bowing and moving on, tried to shrink into the chair without actually disappearing. Between greetings, the princess spoke as if this were normal. You are Terran, she said. Yes. You serve as a representative? I sort of. I'm an attach. I mostly take notes and translate when needed. She watched a delegation of reptilian envoys approach. And your leader sent you here with no protection. I'm with the delegation, I protested weakly. There are security teams. Her gaze flicked toward the edges of the hall, where Terran security stood in discreet suits, scanning constantly. They cannot stand on this dais, she said. Not without permission. And permission is not given lightly. My pulse ticked faster. So, you pulled me up here because you were worried. She paused just long enough to make me hope. Then she said, partly. And the other part? Her lips curved slightly. Curiosity. I stared at her. Curiosity about what? About you. Her voice remained soft, but there was weight behind it. A species that enters the wider galaxy with open hands and clenched fists. A people who build music into their radios and weapons into their prayers. That's dramatic. It is accurate, she said, and there was no malice, only observation. Your kind fascinates the court. Some fear you. Some dismiss you. Some wish to claim you as tools. I felt my mouth go tight. We're not tools. I know. Her gaze sharpened. But knowing is not what governs them. Perception is. Another diplomat approached, a tall being with a long crest of feathers and eyes like polished bronze. It bowed deeply. Radiant daughter of the ninth spiral, it said, voice smooth. Your presence honors this gathering. The princess inclined her head. The diplomat's eyes slid toward me, the smallest flash of disdain in their angle. And your companion, it added, the words carefully chosen. The princess's tone cooled by a single degree. This is my guest. The diplomat hesitated. A Terran guest. Yes. Private arrangement? The princess smiled. It was a pretty expression that made the air around it feel colder. Public, she said, and her voice carried just enough for nearby circles to hear. As you can see. The diplomat bowed again, tighter this time, and withdrew. I felt the ripple spread. Conversations adjusted around that statement like water-changing course around a stone. I leaned close again. You're doing this on purpose. She didn't deny it. They have grown complacent. With? What? With assuming they understand the shape of my decisions, she said. With believing my position is a decorative crown placed upon a quiet head. I glanced at her. And it's not. Her eyes remained on the crowd. It is a crown. It is also a knife. A key. A promise. A threat. I opened my mouth, then shut it. I was suddenly very aware of how far above my pay grade I'd climbed. A pause formed in the reception's flow, like an intake of breath. A figure entered from a side archway, followed by attendants carrying a long sealed case of carved stone. The diplomat straightened. The nobles quieted. Even the music softened. The case was placed at the foot of the dais. An attendant announced the offering of House Velisar. The nobles who'd cornered me earlier were among that house. I recognized the same chime of ornaments, the same poised arrogance. Their representative stepped forward, head high. "Radiant daughter," they said, bowing, "we present a relic from the first flight, an artifact of our lineage, a symbol of our devotion and our desire for closer bonds between our house and your throne." My stomach nodded. I'd read about this. Houses offered gifts like this as part of courtship negotiations, as political moves, as entanglements. The princess remained still. "Open it." The stone case clicked and unfolded like a blooming flower. Inside lay a lattice of metal so fine it looked like frozen smoke. It pulsed faintly, responding to the ambient light. Gasps rippled. That was a serious gift. The representative's gaze flicked toward me again, irritation peeking through their ceremonial mask. "We offer this," they continued, "as a token of our sincerity, and as evidence that we hold no disdain for those who would, how does one phrase it, find themselves misplaced." The last words were sweet poison. I felt the heat return to my face. My hands tightened on the chair. The princess turned her head slowly, like a predator noticing movement. Her voice stayed calm, but the room leaned closer to hear. "House Velisar," she said, "you have offered a beautiful object." The representative's posture lifted, confidence blooming. The princess continued, "And you have also offered an insult." Silence snapped tight. The representative froze. "Your Radiance, I—" "Do not," she said gently, and it sounded far more dangerous than shouting. "I invited my guest. You attempted to humiliate him in my presence." A murmur moved through the hall like wind through dry leaves. The representative lowered their head, abruptly smaller. "It was not my intent." "It was," she said, "but I will accept your relic." Relief flickered in their stance. The princess added, "as compensation." Every head in the room tilted. The representative stammered, "Compensation?" The princess's gaze remained steady. "For the discourtesy shown to my guest, and for the assumption that your house may dictate the social boundaries of this court." The representative swallowed. "We meant only to test," the princess finished, "to see how far you may push before I react." "Consider the relic my answer." A wave of quiet shock rippled outward. The representative bowed stiffly, retreating with a face that had gone too pale. The princess turned to me at last, her expression unreadable. "You were right," she said quietly. "This will cause trouble." My voice came out thin. "You just publicly slapped a major house." "I corrected them," she said. "There is a difference." I stared at the relic, then at the crowd, then back at her. "You did that for me." "For my court," she corrected. Then, after a breath, "And yes." "For you," my heart thudded. "Why?" The princess studied me, and for a moment the mask of royalty slipped just enough to reveal something else underneath. Something lonely. "Because I have spent my life being watched," she said softly, "and I am tired of being unseen." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the first honest thing that came to mind. "I see you." Her eyes widened just a fraction. Then she looked away quickly, as if annoyed with herself for reacting. "A Terran boldness," she murmured. "It will get you hurt." "It already almost did," I said. Her lips twitched again, that faint amusement. "Then you will need better allies." A new attendant approached, bowing low. "Radiant daughter, the Counselor of Ven requests a private audience." The princess's gaze sharpened. "Already." She rose from her throne smoothly. The room responded, instantly standing, bowing, pausing their conversations like obedient puppets. Then she did something that made my brain short-circuit all over again. She extended her hand toward me. Not the wrist grab this time. Not a command. An invitation. Come, she said. I stared at her hand like it was a live explosive. If I took it, the message would be undeniable. Not a mistake, not a random mercy, a chosen proximity. If I didn't, I'd embarrass her in front of everyone. I stood and took her hand. The hall shifted around us, a sea parting for a royal procession. She led me down a side corridor lined with more carved spirals and soft-lit alcoves. The noise of the reception dulled behind us, replaced by the faint hum of the building's energy systems. A pair of guards waited near a private chamber door. Their armor was sleek, metallic, and elegant in a way that suggested it was designed as much for intimidation as protection. They bowed to her and stepped aside. Inside, the chamber was smaller, quieter, designed for conversation that could change star maps. The Counselor of Ven stood waiting. They were a broad, heavy-bodied being with stone-like skin, their eyes bright like polished gems. They bowed. Radiant Daughter, your guest. The pause around guest was like a knife being slid slowly out of its sheath. The princess sat in a high-backed chair, then gestured to a seat beside her. Again, a human seat. I sat, trying to look like I belonged in rooms where planets were bartered like chess pieces. The counselor's gaze lingered on me. Is this necessary? The princess's voice remained calm. Yes. The counselor's nostrils flared. House Velisir is furious. They will interpret your action as an affront. Let them, the princess said. The counselor leaned forward. They will accuse you of being manipulated. The princess's eyes turned icy. By whom? A Terranatach who was looking for a chair. I winced. The counselor's mouth, if it was a mouth, tightened. Perception becomes reality. Then we will craft perception, the princess replied, as if discussing fabric. The counselor's gaze returned to me. You, human, do you understand the position you've been placed in? I swallowed. Not fully. Then you are more honest than most, the counselor said dryly. Your species is volatile, interesting, dangerous. Your presence beside the princess sends a signal. I glanced at the princess. What signal? She answered without looking at me. That the throne of Illyrian chooses its own alliances. The counselor's tone sharpened. And if the court challenges this? The princess's fingers tapped the armrest once. Then they challenged me. A weight settled into the room. The kind of weight that meant this wasn't about me anymore. It was about power. The counselor exhaled slowly. You risk destabilizing the spiral houses. I risk nothing I cannot control, she said. The counselor's eyes narrowed. Even the Terrans? The princess finally looked at me. The question hung there like a blade. I thought of Earth, my home, a patchwork of stubborn nations and old grudges stitched together by new hope. I thought of our diplomats trying to look calm among species that had been playing this game for millennia. I thought of how easily people decided humans were either barbarians or pets. I lifted my chin. We're not here to be owned, I said quietly. We're here to stand. The counselor watched me for a long moment. Then they gave a slow nod. Interesting. The princess's gaze warmed by a fraction, like a star emerging from cloud cover. The counselor turned back to her. Then you intend to use the human as what? A statement? A shield? The princess's answer came soft and absolute. A mirror, she said. The counselor blinked. A mirror. They look at him, the princess continued, and they reveal themselves. Their contempt, their fear, their greed, their curiosity, their willingness to insult a guest in my presence. Her eyes glittered. He is honest, untrained in our masks. His reactions are real. I felt my stomach drop. So I'm bait, The princess's gaze slid to me again, and for a moment something almost like apology flickered there. "You are not bait," she said. "You are." Unexpected. The counselor made a sound that might have been laughter. Unexpected is the most dangerous thing in a court. The princess nodded. Yes. A silence followed, full of calculations. Then the counselor said, "House Velisur will demand reparation." The princess's smile returned small, sharp. They already received it. I accepted their relic. They paid for their arrogance. And they will not accept that, the counselor warned. Then they will make noise, the princess said. And while they make noise, we will move. The counselor's eyes narrowed. Move where? The princess leaned back, posture elegant, and spoke as if discussing a simple social arrangement. Toward the Terran delegation, she said. My head snapped toward her. What? She didn't look at me, but her fingers tightened slightly on the armrest, betraying just a hint of tension. You came to these halls, she said, and everyone assumes you came to beg. We didn't. Of course you didn't, she interrupted smoothly. But they assume. They always assume. And your leaders, practical blunt, will struggle to navigate the Spiral House's games. The counselor's gaze sharpened. You propose an alliance. The princess nodded once. My brain tried to catch up. A real alliance? Like political? The princess looked at me then, fully, and her eyes were not cold now. They were bright. Terran, she said softly, you were looking for a seat. I swallowed. I offered you one, she continued. But Illyrian does not offer seats without meaning. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. The counselor watched us like someone watching a fuse burn. The princess's voice dropped. Meant only for me now. Sit beside me, she said again. But this time the words didn't sound like a command. They sounded like an oath, being formed. I took a slow breath. If this was a trap, it was a trap the size of a solar system. If it was an opportunity, it was also a storm. I looked at her and chose honesty again. I don't want to be your decoration, I said. Her gaze held mine. Good. I don't want to be used. I will not promise you will not be, she said quietly. This is politics. Everyone is used. But I will promise you this. I will not pretend you are less than you are. My throat tightened. And what am I? Her eyes softened, and there it was again, that lonely edge behind the crown. A person, she said, in a room full of masks. The counselor cleared their throat, impatient. Radiant daughter, the court will demand an explanation for tonight. The princess rose. The chamber seemed to straighten with her. Let them, she said. Tomorrow I will announce a formal cultural exchange with Terra. A public gesture. A bridge. The counselor's eyes widened slightly. You move quickly. I must, she said. They will try to seize the narrative. I will take it first. She turned to me and extended her hand again. This time I didn't hesitate. I stood and took it. The princess's grip was warm now, less like polished stone and more like living warmth. As we walked back toward the reception hall, the muffled noise grew louder, the music rising again. I knew when we re-entered, every eye would turn. Every rumor would bloom. Every hidden blade would shift in its sheath. I leaned close to her and whispered, if this goes badly, it could start a war. Her lips curved, faint and fearless. Then, she whispered back, let us make sure it starts something better. We stepped into the light together. And the galaxy watched where I sat.